Oh, after a short hiatus, we are back. We are back. Welcome to the Cigar Chronicles. I am one half of the dynamic duo. I'm Tremont Arnold.
And I'm Ernest Tilley.
And today we have a very esteemed guest, if that is a big enough adjective to describe her. But I will let Ernest introduce our guests in just a second. First, we want to thank BS3 Network. We also would like to thank Roku TV for the opportunity to host this podcast. We would also like to thank all of our podcast affiliates, our sponsors, Cajun Mouth. If you're ever in Las Vegas, Nevada, please visit Cajun Mouth for some good Cajun cuisine. Also, Crowns by Trey. And last but not least, Wing Snob, Black owned and operated. So please support our sponsors. So thank you again. So Ernest, I'm going to leave it up to you to introduce our esteemed guest today.
Absolutely. It gives me great pleasure to introduce our guest tonight, Congresswoman, Congressional District 30, Eddie Bernice Johnson. And y'all, please, I'm going to give a caveat in advance. If I start stuttering, it's not Tourette's. I'm just so happy to have her on the show. And like the song said, Lord, just don't move my mountain, just give me the strength to climb. Let me go ahead and introduce our guest. Congresswoman Eddie Bernice Johnson is serving her 15th term representing the 30th Congressional District of Texas. She is the first African American and woman to chair the House Committee on Science, Space, and Technology, and is the Dean of the Texas Congressional Delegation, in addition to serving as Dean of the Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona Democratic Congressional Delegation. She's also the highest ranking Texan on the House Transportation Infrastructure Committee and the first nurse to be elected to the U.S. Congress. Congresswoman Johnson began her career as the first female African-American chief psychiatric nurse at the VA hospital in Dallas. In 1972, she became the first nurse ever elected to the Texas State House and achieved that same distinction upon her election to Texas Senate in 1986. From 2011 to 2018, she served as the Science, Space, and Technology Committee first African-American and first female ranking member. Congresswoman Johnson has a reputation as a stateswoman who worked with both parties to get things done. She's also widely recognized one of the most effective legislators in Congress, credited with authoring and co-authoring more than 177 bills that were passed by the House and Senate and signed into law by the president. She has a longstanding reputation for providing excellent constituents services to the people who elected her. She is the founder of the Diversity and Innovation Caucus, the founder and co-chair of the Congressional Homelessness Caucus, co-chair of the Congressional Lupus Caucus, and co-chair of the Congressional Caucus of Bosnia. Congresswoman Johnson had the honor to serve as chair of the Congressional Black Caucus during the 107th Congress. Her acclaimed initiative, A World of Women for World Peace, has gained national and international recognition. Congresswoman Johnson is the proud mother of a son, Kirk, and of her 3 grandsons, Kirk Jr., David, and James. Thank you, Congresswoman Johnson, for joining our podcast. That's a pretty distinctive resume that you've created. We certainly appreciate you joining us tonight.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for your invitation.
No problem, no problem. I guess we'll go ahead and jump on in there. Take it away, Trey.
Okay, Congresswoman Johnson, I just want to know, especially with you making a pivot into retirement, what inspires you?
What inspired me for my career?
What inspires you? Yes, ma'am.
Well, I've always, I came from a family that was involved in the community and in the church. And so I've always been involved with activities going on. I remember my parents registering voters when people had to pay poll tax. And so I don't know a time when I was not attempting to be aware of the importance of voting and being involved. That was one of the things that I was doing when I was encouraged to run for public office. I had no dream, no imagination, no plan to ever run for office. I was just helping to try to provide for the opportunity for us to have representation. And so I walked the neighborhood raising money to help to pay for a lawsuit so that we could have single member districts. And then I was working with a community group that included State Representative Zan Holmes and state school, the Dallas Independent School District trustee, Dr. Emmett Conrad, to survey our community and to make sure that we had good candidates to run after we won the lawsuit. After several days, it was Reverend Holmes that asked me to resign from the group because he wanted to submit my name as a candidate. I was really quite surprised because I never dreamed of running for office. But I cooperated and ran back in 1972, which was quite different from now, and became the first African American woman to run and win a public office in Dallas. I didn't even realize I was that much of a first until later when I was interviewed by a University of Texas professor who told me that, you became the first African American woman to win any office in Dallas. How does it feel? I said, I don't know, because I never thought about that part of it.
Mm-hmm. That's crazy.
Wow, that is. What has been some of the obstacles faced as a Democrat being in D.C.?
Well, it's the same obstacles you would find no matter where you are, whether you're in D.C. or anywhere else. It has to do not only with the subjects in which you are interested, but also the party, and sometimes even the color. Every Democrat is not the same. Every Republican is not the same. You just stand for what you believe to be right and fair and try to convince enough people to help you pass something, or you help someone else pass it. It is not so important as to who carries it. What is important is what is being carried, and who does it help. What opportunities does it bring? I went into Congress in a majority and was in a majority for one term. As a matter of fact, I've been in a minority most of the time I've been in Congress. I don't complain about it because I can only be responsible for what I can help do. But you take what you get and you do the best with it. Out of 30 years, I've probably been in a majority, 10 of them, perhaps. And so you can't give up on your goals and aspirations because you're in a minority. You try to find enough people to work with you. And I know all of the things. I know that most of you don't know all the things that I was able to get done representing the various District 30s, which have been many. I've only served 1 or 2 terms with a district that didn't change because the Republicans got the majority. They changed lines whenever they got ready. And all you had is what they want you to have. I would say that until 10 years after, let's see, when was that? In the 90s, up until 10 years ago, I was the only Democrat from Austin, Oklahoma. So I had the responsibility of doing all the casework of people for no matter the color, but especially for minorities. And so you have to take what opportunities you have and do the best you can with them. I never spent a lot of time complaining because complaining does not necessarily change anything.
Right.
Just did the best I could with what I had.
That's a great segue to one of the other questions that we're going to be talking about. And I want to address some of the comments we've been getting thus far. Facebook, I want to say that may be James Turknett that may be commenting. If it is you, just make sure we recognize you, James. Yeah, like he was your former boss. I think that is James Turknett. But if that is you, please just put it in the comments so we can make sure we recognize you, James. Thanks, Robin. She thinks she states that you're amazing. And I'm gonna get to your question, Robin. So give me just a moment on that. So I guess on a lighter note, what was your first thought when you were advised that the Dallas Amtrak station would be named after you?
It was just something that happened. I appreciated it. I didn't work for it. Didn't ask for it. I had nothing. Had no input on it. So I appreciate Mayor Rollins taking the leadership. And I must say that he did come to me and ask me if it was okay. About 2 years before it was actually done, we both knew, and the city council had voted to do that. I was not in a hurry, but he was getting ready to go out of office, and I thought, well, maybe we ought to do this while he's still mayor. And so that's why it was done at the time that it was. But it had been named at least 2 years earlier than that.
Oh, really?
I know that.
I didn't know it.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I didn't know that.
That is interesting. And also, why do you feel that now was the time that you want to just go ahead and retire?
Well, first of all, my age, and it was completing 30 years in the Congress. And I thought that was a time to make the change. I also, for about a year before I announced that I was retiring, I had been dealing with a knee that needed replacing. And that was not comfortable, but I didn't talk about it to the public. I complained to my family. And I was not resting well, but I was still working. As a matter of fact, the work is what took my mind off of it many times. And I know that you might know that about 30 different ministers had a conference call with me and pleaded with me to stay at least one more term. And that was actually a week before I actually announced my retirement. I did consider it. They knew I had been considering retirement. They wanted me to stay a little bit longer. And I appreciated that very much. But I knew what I was dealing with. And I thought that to cap it off at 30 years was appropriate. Also, at age 86. So I thought it was retirement time. I have almost 50 years in government service. Plus, I have, as a matter of fact, when I retire, I'll have 49.7 months of government service time. And state, I retired from the state. I have time in the state Senate and state House and the state Senate. And so it was time for someone else to take that leadership.
Gotcha. Thank you so much for that. And if you're for our listeners, again, we have Congresswoman Eddie Bernice Johnson on. If you have any questions, please put them in the comment. We'll definitely try to get to those questions as we go through this conversation. Go ahead, Trey. I'm sorry.
Okay. What I want to do is I'm going to address one of the questions that we had in the comment box. This is from Robin Johnson. She asked, how do you feel about the voting laws?
Of course, I don't feel good about them. All my life, I have fought for equal rights and voting and equal opportunity. As a matter of fact, back during the Ford administration, I believe, I was invited to the White House for the reauthorization, along with Martin Luther King's father and wife, and a number of other people elected from the southern part of the country. I think I might have been the only elected Dixon at that time invited, but I did go, and I realized how important that voting was throughout the South, especially because we all knew that we had not gotten a fair chance of representation in the South, and we still have not. And so it will continue to be a high priority. And because we're beginning to make some inroads, we see the fight back. We see that clearly that desire for us to vote is not that popular because we tend to elect people that we feel understand some of the needs that we have. And that is not necessarily what some of the people want. And let me hasten to say, I truly believe that a majority of the people in this country want to see every eligible voter be able to vote without trouble and have that vote counted. But I also believe that they're more so intimidated than any other voter. The fair-minded voter is more intimidated. The kind of things that even our state has put into law it's just really unthinkable that this time of our lives we are dealing with voter suppression, trying to count the votes before they're cast, trying to determine what votes will be counted. We cannot allow that to prevail. It is important to fight back. It is important that our votes be counted, but it's extraordinarily important that we get as many people to vote as possible. Some people are so intimidated by this, are so inconvenienced that they give in. We must make sure that the message goes forward. Nothing is more important than voting. We see our nation moving backwards because they are winning. And some of it has to do with the way they're gerrymandering. We got to impact that as well. And the only way we do that is voting. Our greatest power in a democracy is voting.
Wow. And definitely, I definitely agree. The next question I have is it's more so of a two-part question. Do you think that we can turn Texas blue this upcoming election? And if so, how do we turn Texas blue?
We can turn Texas blue anytime we vote. We've got the votes. We just got to use them. You know, I drive through our neighborhoods just this last election when President Biden was on the ticket in Texas. They had all these people saying they were on his team and all. I saw nobody do anything. And calling, trying to say, when are we going to get started? Because I saw Republicans coming to the building where I live. I saw the governor riding his wheelchair with candidates up and down the street. I saw no Democrat out there doing anything. And I kept calling and kept asking, when are we going to get some activity on the street? Now, people take credit for a lot of stuff they do, but who knows it but them? And if nobody knows it, it's not being done. And so it takes us all to put forth effort. I just said it earlier today when our candidate for governor at his meeting this evening. If we knock on these doors, register people in time, go back and encourage them to come out to vote, we got the numbers in this state for it to be blue. We just got to make sure they're put in a position to be counted.
Y'all heard it. So all y'all folks that vote on this upcoming runoff election and these constitutional amendments that are on the ballots, if we see the numbers,
it's our future. You can't complain if you don't do all you can to make sure that the future is not in your favor. Absolutely. You've got to do the work. Don't leave it to anyone else. We all have a job to do the work. You know, I remember years ago, before I ran for office, and I ran for office 50 years ago this year, I was working at the VA hospital as a registered nurse, and I saw how employees that were not professional, but good caregivers being mistreated. I organized the union. I couldn't even belong. I was a supervisor. That union is still active. We can organize people, give them the right information and leadership, and it will prevail. We have simply got to put forth the efforts. When I get ready for my own election, when I get ready to help someone, you know where I go? To the voters. That's who has the power. To the voters. Get in touch with those voters and encourage them to vote. But all in between, you can't act like you don't know them. You got to keep in touch with people. Help them through their questions and through their troubles. And that is not just left to an elected official. I get more complaints coming into my office that does not have a federal kind of interest. There are questions that should be answered by city council people or county people or state people. I don't turn them away, but I do educate them and tell them that you elect somebody at this level that's supposed to take care of that. So you keep that in mind. This is who you're supposed to call. We're going to help you if we can. But we don't do enough educating of our own. And when we get in office, we have to understand that that is not the end of the office. That is the beginning of the responsibility. To keep in touch with them, to answer their questions, to encourage them to participate. We've got enough people in this state for it to be blue that will want what we want, vote what we like, we vote when they vote. It's everybody's responsibility to get people out there and make sure that they vote. Democracy is wonderful, but it is not free. It takes everybody working together.
Wonderful, but it's not free. That's a bumper sticker right there.
So I'm a piggyback off of Congresswoman too. Like I say, it's more to it than just getting people registered to vote. You know, after we get them registered to vote, we also have to make sure that they get to the polling sites and vote. You know, because that's only half of the half of the solution. We definitely have to make sure that we get people to the polling sites, and more so even with that, we have to educate and let people know of the people who's running so they can get out and vote for the people that's going to look out for our best interests. So I definitely agree with everything you said.
And getting elected is not the end of the responsibility. That is the beginning.
Right.
I'm sorry. I guess the next question I would have for you is when you did consider that this was going to be your last run, kind of take us through your journey for endorsement and how ultimately you decided to endorse Jasmine Crockett, and were there others that sought your endorsement? I'm
delighted that you asked that. There were many more people that came to me for support than what actually filed. I spoke to all of them very honestly. It was not based upon what I liked them or disliked them. What I did tell everyone from the beginning to the end, that I was going to try to endorse someone that in my judgment was interested in getting a job done and not just interested in having a title. And there were people probably that had more interest, but in my judgment were too old to start this process. You know, I was in about 51 when I went to Congress. I can tell you, they're a lot younger now. So going into a body when you're a little bit older than you ought to be makes the work a little bit harder, because you got to keep up with everybody there. And you got to convince them to work with you. Now, we have a very diverse population in that Democratic majority right now, and God knows I hope we keep it, but I don't know. We've gotten to be probably true for this redistricting, in my judgment, has caused extremes. And we're never going to get anything done with extremes. When you have extreme no's and extreme yeses, that's where you're going to be. It's never going to come to us working together. It takes a lot of common sense, and it takes a lot of effort. I cannot tell you how many nights that I never went to bed, digging for in research, trying to anticipate every question in order to make sure that I can try to convince as many people as possible. And no, I didn't stop at party lines because I was in a minority most of the time I've been there. So you got to have a majority to pass anything. So you got to work with some Republicans.
Mhm.
Some of them might go along with an issue of which you can explain. It's probably not going to be necessarily voting rights. However, I must say that in the House we have voted 5 or 6 times, and all the time that I've been there, we have voted to renew the Voting Rights Act. We have passed every voting rights bill in the House this time, but they're not passing the Senate. And so we do have a two-house situation. In order for anything to become law, it has to pass both houses. And that's one of the problems we have now. We have a very slim majority in both the House and Senate. And everybody does not come from a district where they can afford to be what we consider extreme uh, liberal Democrat or extreme. We got more that comes from districts who can be extreme conservative. When I looked at the candidates who came to me, their ages, their preparation, their readiness, I made my own judgment. I take full responsibility for that judgment. It's nobody else's judgment but mine. And I didn't find anybody at that time. I had been grooming a young woman who decided at the last minute that she decided not to run. So it left me out there looking. I looked at every candidate that came to me and everyone that came to me that didn't become a candidate. I reached out to Jasmine Crockett because I saw her in action. She was a person who showed her interest in getting things done. You know, you can get elected, but if all you do is sit there and eat, it doesn't help us. And so I was looking for someone who was willing to work, take a chance on leadership, work day and night to try to see if you can get your points over. And when I saw that, that's the only person who got in this race that I saw that in. The only one. And I observed everyone that I could. I asked her to run for that reason. And yes, I had known some of the other ones a lot longer than I've known her. But it was not about my popularity. It was about the people of this church that needed representation, that needed somebody interested in them, that needed somebody interested in the job and not just the title. You know, I have worked with a lot of people that just adored their title, but forgot that the people were waiting for them to do something. And I can name some of them I won't, but you'll hear me in the future because I'm ready to say it all. Um, I'm tired of us electing people that don't look back to help us as well. I'm tired of people getting elected and all they do is aggrandize themselves to move up in Washington for several positions and lope around the country and lope around the world, but they forget there are people at home waiting for them to do something.
Thank you so much for that
I do
honest.
not want to be one of those, and I have not been.
I can appreciate your honesty and your sincerity in that. So we certainly appreciate that. I do want to address a question we got from one of the comments, Robin Johnson. Do you think her voice can be heard? Do you see her being it in the long run?
I'm sorry. What was that question?
The question was, do you think her voice can be heard? Comma, do you see her being it in the long run? I'm assuming she's saying being there for the long run.
You know, I don't know what her voice will be in the Congress. She hasn't been there yet. We'll have to see. But just as I'm saying to you, I've said to her that this is not an easy job. Mm-hmm. It's not one you've ever had before, and it's not one that you'll ever have other than it. It's just one type of work in the Congress that's different from any other experience that I've had. And I've been in the state House and the state Senate. It is more profound. You're dealing with more diversity. You're dealing with 435 people for every bill, every amendment you're trying to pass. You're dealing with people that are Democrats and Republicans, and they might be from Podunk or Uhunk, anywhere, USA. You got to take the time to spend time with them, asking them for support. I can tell you that I received good support from some Republicans, some from Texas. I don't see that much now, but when I was working in a minority, I was still producing for my district. And the only way I could produce is to work with Republicans. And I did it. And I don't apologize for it. I did my homework. I knew the pitfalls. I would share that with them. I would let them know what the possibilities could be and why I could not go with some of those possibilities. And I can enumerate to you my first election, Roosevelt and West Dallas was flooding every time we had a big rain. And I looked at that and I made a commitment because I went to our local mayor, which was in Annette's house, and I said to her, tell me what to do to stop this flooding. And she said, the Corps of Engineers has got to help us. I promised myself that if I lived when I got there, we would stop the flooding. Now, how many times have you heard about that flooding recently? That was one of my first projects. And I've just been invited to come and say something next week because I've been on the Corps of Engineers all for 30 years, making sure that we don't have that kind of flooding anymore. But the pumps, the deepening of the Trinity has stopped that flooding in our community. Nobody even talks about it anymore, but it takes work to get that done. City Hill, they couldn't afford drinking water. And I was up on the floor 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, waiting for a chance to get up and speak for them to get something done so they could get drinking water. So if you wonder why Cedar Hill is a strong supporter, they have drinking water because of my efforts. And most people don't even know that. This mixed master here, where all these freeways come together downtown, that was my legislation in 1993 when we had a Democratic majority. It passed. But when President Bush came in and started the war, they pulled it down. We had to restart it. And we just cut the ribbon this February for its completion. Now, I say that only to say this. You can get big things done sometimes overnight. But if you're persistent and you're serious about it and you'll do your homework instead of going to receptions, you can get it done.
Woo-wee. That sounds like some shade right there, Congresswoman. But I love it. Good Lord. Let me tell you something, boy. I don't know. The new 26 boy, you sharp as a tack, Jack. Golly, you dropping some jewels. Well, somebody just said you dropping nuggets. So again, we thank you for that. We thank you for that. I guess we'll shift to a little lighter note as far as your bio has stated that you were the first nurse, the Texas State House and also to the Texas Senate. What advice would you give those
in the U.S. Congress?
In U.S. Congress, I'm sorry. Catch me.
All three bodies, I was the first nurse. But I tell you what, I will never be the last one.
There you go. That was perfect. Perfect question. What advice would you give those who would like to travel your path?
Well, really, it doesn't make much difference about your career. What makes the difference is your compassion for getting something done.
Yes.
Your interest in the job. You can have, I would suggest, a good background education because it is not simple to go through all of the details that you have to go through to understand and analyze what you're trying to do so that you do it, so that when you do something, it's what you intended. You got to have a good educational background. You also got to have a real lust for knowledge. And you got to be willing to prepare yourself to do the job. It doesn't make much difference what your profession might be. But some professions do give you a little bit better grasp on subjects. I'm very appreciative of my background in nursing, especially psychiatric nursing, because in psychiatric nursing, I had to study behavior and I had to convince myself that every single opinion was important to the person that had it, and I needed to respect it. And so that has carried me a long ways. I don't disrespect people because they disagree with me. They also don't influence me because they differ from me. I try to work with them. I try to create a dialogue and I will explain exactly why I need to get where I'm trying to go. And I'll also say, if you want to go to the same place, I'll try to help you as well. So you can talk to any Republican around almost anywhere in Texas, but certainly in North Texas, because every project they got, I have to lead it for them and work with them to get it. And I have no apologies for that. That that Cowboy Stadium is successful because I took it the leadership with Joe Barton to get done what needed to be done. And if nobody else knows it, Jones does. And so same thing with our universities. Our medical school has moved up notches because of the support that I've been able to give to them. We have two universities that have become first class, first tier universities because of the support that I've been able to give to them. The University of Texas at Arlington, the largest state institution with the highest amount of minorities, and the University of Texas at Dallas. I don't have time to advertise all that I do to try to get these institutions and all that done. I have focused on research because you cannot do anything without first researching and making sure that your ideas are valid. And I tell you what, I have been put to the test. Everything I tried to do for HCBUs, HBCUs when I got there, everything I tried to do for women in particular, especially in STEM education, coming from a city where Texas Instruments had just put STEM education on the front burner with developing that chip, that semiconductor that now rules the world. That is one of the most important businesses in the world that affects every one of our lives. And so, of course, I passed my first legislation related to that in 1974. But every chance I've gotten, I've passed that much more because that's the one area that we as a people can excel if we understand what we're trying to do. You know, what bothers me is to see somebody go to college and major in political science and think they're going to get a job without going to law school or going to some graduate school. That is not going to exist any time anymore in this country. It bothers me to have to import talent when we've got people here with abilities if we can get them going in the right direction. It bothers me for people to think you got to have a college degree to be productive and to produce. But you do not. You just got to have some other type of training. That's why we have such strength in our community colleges. And I've tried very hard to make sure that we continue to strengthen them because we have a number of students who can go and be very wealthy without ever getting a college degree, but got a skill that we need now. I want to share a little joke with you right quick that I carry with me. I have a colleague who is an attorney, a member of the Congressional Black Caucus. And he got to the office, got to a meeting we were having late one day, and he said, "I'm sorry I'm running late, but I had a plumbing problem at home and I had to stay there and get it done before leaving New York to come." And he said, a plumber came. He was there exactly 47 minutes. And he charged me $667. And I said to him, "I'm an attorney. I cannot charge $600 and some an hour for my work." He said, "That's why I don't practice law anymore. I'm a plumber." And so I say that to young, you don't have to be an attorney to make a good living. You just have to have a. And that's what our community colleges are doing, a beautiful job in helping our young people.
Oh yeah. Good Lord. Ooh-wee. Boy, I'm telling you, boy, I'm a seeker of knowledge. So, boy, you giving it to us this evening, Congresswoman. I did want to address one other question before I turn it over to you, Tremont. There's another question. Do you think building the broadband will go to communities that need it instead of Texas just building it on top of broadband that already works?
Well, let me say this. In any technology, nothing remains the same forever. There's always progress and improvement. Every community needs broadband. If you look at the history of cable, you know that rural areas at first had cable before the cities got it, because we had all these major stations that were on TV, but rural areas could only get it if they had cable.
Mm-hmm.
And they saw how that technology worked. It is spread. Now, where are the deserts? The broadband, they're in low-income communities. And some of them are within the city limits of Dallas. Those are the kind of battles we must fight to make sure that equality is there. And I've been trying to work on that for as long as I've been there. And we will continue to work on making sure that we have access. There was a time when the average person didn't think about getting a computer, and may not now, because there are some other gadgets, like different other gadgets that can almost compete with the computer. Yeah, your telephone is one of them. But you will need some type of technology. And I'm here to tell you that it does not work without the energy it takes to make it work, which includes the support of broadband. We're trying very hard to make sure that every community, rural and some urban, have access. We could see how much it was needed during the virus. When kids, they were driving up to McDonald's to try to get some kind of contact with some type of energy.
Wi-Fi.
Right. Or they had portable gadgets that they could go to the library and take home. Every home should have access to broadband because it's an essential element to keep up with anything. And so we won't stop pushing that until we get it done.
Thank you.
Gotcha. Congressman, when you officially retire, what's next?
I'll let you know when I get there. I've been approached by many people in many areas, but I first want to retire. And that will be at 12 noon, January 3rd or 4th in 2023. I'll be free from having to live two places with the unpacked suitcases. Most people don't know that I'm only home on weekends, but I try my best not to be missed in the week. I don't know what that's going to be like. Can you imagine? I haven't been like that in 50 years. But I'm going to try it, and I hope God will bless me to enjoy it.
Wow.
Well deserved.
Congresswoman, if you could turn back the hands of time, what would you tell your 18-year-old self?
You know, I don't know, because I didn't tell myself very much back when I was there. My inspiration and my direction came with a lot of help and a lot of encouragement. I've always been interested in people. I've always been interested in community affairs. I was volunteering when we were giving out polio vaccines and tuberculosis. I remember getting off at 8 o'clock in the morning at the VA hospital as a nurse and going to West Dallas as a volunteer to give polio vaccines, to give tuberculosis vaccine, trying to make sure that you use whatever time you could to bring everyone along with you. And so I've just been a person that always had an interest in what was going on around me. I remember that I would volunteer. I remember way back when I was a nurse at the VA, I volunteered to go out on a Sunday afternoon to do glaucoma testing. And I got there and they didn't want a black to do it. They never had a black to volunteer before. And I just said, well, I'm willing, but if you don't want me to do it, then I'll volunteer somewhere else. And so it's not so much of it is really kind of left up to the individual what they're interested in doing and what they're willing to give their time to do. I was always more interested in something like that and going to a nightclub. I just never cared for that. That is, first of all, when I was young, you went to a nightclub, you had so much smoke in your hair, you couldn't sleep at night. And so I just decided that was not a place I wanted to be. So I spent my time doing little church work and doing little community volunteering, and I got a great deal of satisfaction out of that. Now, I don't knock anybody who enjoys it. I would do anything to make sure it was possible for them, but you pick and choose what you desire. And my satisfaction came with doing things that I thought would ultimately help people.
Gotcha. And so let me ask you this. I guess during your journey in public office, what are some things knowing now that you would have done differently?
I don't know. Perhaps I would have spent more time explaining to people how I was spending my time. Because I spent most of my time researching, trying to be prepared. I didn't want to embarrass myself by being caught off guard. And I never took the time to explain that to people as to where I was and what I was doing. But to a large degree, it paid off. And anybody think they could get by without doing their work, they in for a little wait.
Right.
Good. And in addition to the accomplishments that you have achieved, what would be your top 2 or 3 bills that you've authored or co-authored that were passed into law?
Ooh, that's a big one. Well, I think that one of the simple bills that I passed when I was in the Texas House was making free breakfast mandatory as long as the federal government made it possible. And that bill was challenged all the way to Supreme Court twice. One by the Garland School District and one by the Lubbock School District, but it was upheld. And the research has shown that students have performed so much better when they can listen to the teacher instead of their stomachs when they go to school. And I worked with the Dallas Independent School District. We developed a hunger summit that we could keep watch over that, so that now in Dallas Independent School District, the kids can get food without asking. They'll make it available for them in the classroom. Kids perform better when they get breakfast. And so I think of all of the legislation that I've passed, that's one that's had some very primary impact.
You have 1 or 2 others?
I think that funding DART has been a major improvement. Also, not just funding the transportation itself, but I insisted on them putting places out there to cover people waiting for the trains and the buses to come. Because for years they stood in the rain or cold or whatever, heat. And so when we got that passed, I said to Dallas, put them in South Dallas first. Put them in the southern sector of the city first. I don't know if you've noticed, but when you're waiting for one now, we have a place to wait.
So free breakfast and funding DART.
That's all right.
Wow. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Trey. You good?
Okay. Um, like I said, we're definitely coming down. Want to know if you could have dinner with three politicians dead or alive, who would they be and why?
That's very interesting. Lyndon Johnson, who I thought was the best president in the history of this nation, would be my first choice. I think that, of course, Martin Luther King. I had conversations. As a matter of fact, my father-in-law, was a friend to the King family, so I did get a chance to meet them and visit. And of course, I became very close to Coretta. And my cousin was married to Malcolm X. And so.
Wait a minute. Wait, hold on. What? You say your cousin was married to Malcolm X?
Daddy Shabazz was my cousin.
God dog. That's a drop the
And
mic.
So I think that, and I got a cousin that went to Congress with me that was one of the major Black Panthers in the nation. He is retiring also this year.
You're not going to say who it is?
Bobby Rush.
That's amazing.
He was a real Black Panther in Chicago.
That's amazing. God.
So I did have some role models that I had a chance to get to know, that I had a chance to visit with. And I'll go back to this. When you look at what brought us the most progress, you cannot overlook Lyndon Johnson. Voting rights, civil rights, education, Medicare, Medicaid, housing. A Southern man, a Texan, that ultimately caused the South to turn against him because he was so progressive. And we ourselves don't always know where all of those things came from. But Lyndon Johnson did more to bring this country to equality than any president we've had. Think about it. Civil rights, voting rights, educational opportunity, Medicare, Medicaid. Do you realize that when people, before they got Social Security, could not retire and get any benefits, and people who did maid work could not be covered until Lyndon Johnson made sure that everybody had to pay some Social Security so they'd have something when they got too old to work. I don't know a president who has done as much, that has brought us this far, than Lyndon Johnson, a Texan, a Southern man.
I'm glad you. We probably about to say the same thing, Trey. And speaking on that, as far as presidents, is our are our expectations of President Biden following through with the Black agenda realistic, in your opinion? And if so, why?
Well, I think that his agenda is built upon persons who helped him get elected. But I also think that the turf of which we have to deal with that agenda is tougher than it's been since the end of slavery. We're in a very tough environment. And I accuse this redistricting extremism as being the culprit for getting us all these extreme people. But we're in a stage, in my judgment, where democracy is at stake. That's why it's so important that we don't ever miss voting. Because the only way we're going to get rid of some of this is to vote it out of South. And so I think we're in the most challenging time of my lifetime right now, and yours, because when you look at what keeps coming and look at this Supreme Court and look at how bold they are to be unfair, they did not allow Obama to put people in when he could have, but they made sure that they made fast track for anything Trump wanted. That's dangerous, and it's proven to be dangerous. That is not real democracy. So we have so many elements that are at work that was developed from the attitude of the Trump administration, that we better be aware that our democracy could be lost without real diligence.
God, dog. And ooh, and I guess let me just add on to that, because I think it's important for our listener to get an understanding of that. Why do you think it is that the Republicans are so aggressive in getting bills and legislature passed? Why are we so stagnant as far as Democrats to not have that same type of a full court press that they institute, when they're the majority or a simple majority? Why do you think that is? And how can we have the same I guess I can't think of the word, the same dedication to making sure we getting things done like they do, and they're so united in that front?
Well, you just said the word. They are united. We have got to learn how to be united and go into that ballot box and voting in the right people. The only way we're ever going to experience fairness again is to have a majority when they draw these lines for the districts. Because once they draw them, they're going to stay there one way or the other for 10 years, even if you challenge them. The last 10 years, we went to Supreme Court 3 times and won 3 times. But it went right back to the state legislature, who only did what the Republicans wanted to do for little tweaks for them. I don't even remember how many district configurations I've had, but at least 8. When somebody say, oh, she drew 30 and she's been in 30 the whole time, they don't know that the first 30 went from Fort Worth to McKinney, trying to save Martin Frost and any other Democrat. I just had to go down the freeway and just pick up. It was a court-ordered district. There were people that brought lawsuits and took us to court, and that's what got us back in court to redraw these lines. We've had very few districts that remain the same longer than 2 years, because when they go back to be corrected, it goes back to the same body that put the wrong one out in the first place. And so we must be mindful that the people with the power to determine often even democracy is who has the pencil to draw the lines and who has filled the courts with all of these judges that will do as they dictate them. Not necessarily as the Constitution dictates them, but what they feel is their expectations to perform. Let me just give you a little example. We had vacancies in federal courts all over Texas when Clinton tried. Then Obama tried. And even with Bush, we had better luck. But just as soon as Trump came in, whatever vacancies we had disappeared, and the Democrats had absolutely no input. Prior to that, when President Bush was in there, they'd run it by me to see if I had some question about a person being appointed. Cornyn got control of it as the senior Republican, and he didn't even discuss it with us.
God, dog.
And he filled every possible bench that were right-wing to the core. So when they have a right-wing legislature that pass bills, they got a right-wing court sitting there to solidify them. And so you cannot get democracy or democratic or fair action until you have somebody that's willing to be the representative of your position. So we have to watch who we put in place that make these selections. We are in real critically bad shape throughout the South because of Trump's administration that put every judge in there that don't want anything that we want, that all we want is equality. And if you see, even now, with a Democrat in the White House, we cannot get these Southern senators to approve of any appointments to the federal judiciary that we want, right, even with us having a majority in the House and Senate.
Wow. Wow.
So we can get we can get some fairness in New York, in California. But when it comes to the bulk of where the people live, in Mississippi, Alabama, Texas, Louisiana, North Carolina, South Carolina, Florida, they'll whip us every time. So we have to think about not just who wins that office, but what the depth and the breadth of that influence in the office. We're getting whipped at every stage of our democracy. These federal judiciary appointments are okay if they're in the East or West, but don't go to the South.
Well, guys,
that includes Texas.
Let me tell you something, boy. If you ain't learned nothing in here, you stupid. Boy, I tell you, Congresswoman, man, I can't thank you enough. We can't thank you enough for the knowledge that you've given us. Please just hold on after we close out for a debrief. But Trey, take us on now, man. You're muted.
Unmute. You still muted.
You're muted, Trey.
All right, sorry about that. Terry Hollingsworth in Arkansas, she's the first Black county clerk down there. She commented and said, we definitely have to watch who we put in place. So I definitely wanted to send her comment out and everything. But yeah, it was definitely some jewels and some nuggets dropped today. And we definitely appreciate you, Congresswoman Johnson, for tuning in. You could have been doing anything else in the world, but like I said, you chose to be here with us tonight. We definitely appreciate it. Definitely want to close it out. Thank you again for BS3 Network as well as Roku TV, our sponsors, Cajun Mouth, Crowns by Trade, and Wing Snob. And we definitely appreciate everyone for tuning in. And like I said, we took a small hiatus, but we're back. And as you can see, we're back and better than ever. So we definitely appreciate it. And until next Wednesday, we'll definitely talk to you and we'll see you again.